Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Learn About ILUMYA and Why Biologic Treatments May Be Right for You. My name is Bev Bromfield, and I will be the moderator for today's program. Before we start, I'd like to go over a few items about how to participate in today's webinar. You should all be logged in to GoToWebinar and see a control panel on your computer's desktop screen in the upper right corner. You've joined the presentation using your computer speaker system by default. This means if you can hear music through your computer, you should be able to hear the presentation. If you prefer to join over the telephone, select Use Telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to our speaker, Dr. Neal Bhatia. Dr. Bhatia is a board-certified dermatologist in San Diego, California. He serves as Director of Clinical Dermatology at Therapeutics Clinical Research and is the Chief Medical Editor for Practical Dermatology. He has a background in immunology and has interest in mechanisms of therapy, skin cancer, and medical dermatology. Please welcome Dr. Bhatia.
Hi there, everyone, and thanks again for having me on the webinar today. These are some of my relevant disclosures of some of the investigational sponsors we work with in our clinic, as well as some other companies we work with closely. And I wanted to talk a little bit today about psoriasis. I'm sure a lot of you know some things about psoriasis already, as well as have been to the NPF website, as well as heard other webinars like this. But psoriasis is a immune-mediated disease. It's not the same as an autoimmune disease like lupus or some types of arthritis, but it's a disease that the immune system mediates, and in turn, it's your immune system basically influencing and attacking healthy tissue almost unregulated. And in people with plaque stage psoriasis, which is, again, an overactive part of the immune system working to attack that part of the skin, and when this inflammation is rapid in psoriasis of the skin, it causes very excessive production of the top layers of skin, and that leads to that appearance of scaling. You see a lot of redness, as you see in the patches of skin covered with white and silvery scales. And because the nerve endings are involved underneath, it can be very itchy, very painful, and that can lead to cracking or bleeding of the skin. So how do we tell how much of the body is affected? Well, it's interesting because if you look at your palm of your hand, that represents 1% of your body's surface area. And what happens is if you take that 1% and you put it on your chest or your legs or anywhere else, that measures how we measure the severity, which can either be mild, moderate, or severe. And the severity of psoriasis, for example, if it's less than 3%, such as on the elbows or knees, can often be considered mild psoriasis. But in more 3 to 10% range, we consider that to be moderate psoriasis. And then with the patient who's above 10% of their body surface area, we tend to label them as severe or grade them as severe. And that kind of dictates, again, with therapy, but it also helps us understand the patient's experience as their quality of life can be affected, as well as some other parts of their treatment that we want to take into account. And more importantly, we'll look at the severity of each plaque in a different way as well, looking in terms of how thick and how scaly the plaques are, as well as how red they are. So a lot of grading that goes on in the clinic, but also a better understanding of how severe it is so we can discuss options with the patients. And psoriasis is more common than I think any of us realize. There are nearly 8 million people in the US who live with psoriasis right now. And of those 80% of people, there's the most common form, which is plaque stage psoriasis. It can form as other types as well, but our focus today is going to be on plaque psoriasis. And of that percent, 20% of those patients have moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. So we just got done showing how much surface area is involved. With that, over half the patients living with psoriasis say they are really not happy with their current treatment. And these are surveys that have been done since 2013 and even several others after. And we take a lot of quality of life surveys from these patients when they do research, as well as just sporadically, we take assessments of them in the clinic. The worst part is a third of those patients, or a third of people with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis, are not receiving any treatment at all. And this is where we really need to make disease awareness a priority. The other part of this, as I mentioned about arthritis and some other conditions that go along with psoriasis, is it shows that psoriasis is more than skin deep. And not just from the patient experience, but also the emotional and the psychological issues that go along with psoriasis. For example, you'll have patients who say they're embarrassed by the flakes, embarrassed by the redness and things that get left behind. I have patients who will say, well, I'm feeling humiliated. I've been asked if my condition is contagious. And you'll even have a third of the patients who reported acts of bullying or discrimination against them because of their psoriasis. And as you see on the right side, 7 of the 10 patients surveyed, for example, I experienced flare-ups from my psoriasis, which has affected my life. My psoriasis symptoms are debilitating. I currently experience constant flaking and itching, and my psoriasis and symptoms challenge me from doing what matters most. And these important caveats that the patients bring to the discussion really are important to the dermatologist for us to discuss therapy, as well as intercepting the disease and treating it as aggressively as we can, as well as safely as we can. I want to introduce you to our patient, Jim. And Jim is going to share with us his story, as well as his journey to getting onto evaluation by us, as well as discussing some treatment options. So, Jim, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, thanks, Dr. Bhatia. Hi, everybody. I started noticing plaques on my body about 2.5 years ago. The plaques started to get worse and worse. And at one point, I had 70 to 75 spots on my body that would itch like crazy. I had spots on my elbows, all over my hands, all over my feet and legs. I had a horrible experience with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis, and I just wanted it gone. I live in San Diego, California, and there are plenty of beaches and golf courses, and I didn't feel that I could go out in shorts, t-shirts, or sandals, especially when my plaque psoriasis symptoms were at its worst. I feared that people would point at me and make comments. It was terrible. I was a systems engineer for 20 years in corporate America, and my moderate to severe plaque psoriasis symptoms, while they didn't affect my ability to perform my job, they did affect how close I could get to employees. Even though I know psoriasis is not contagious, I felt like people didn't want to get close to me. My moderate to severe plaque psoriasis, it contributed to some really sad days for me. And there were days when I didn't even want to leave my house. So ultimately, I got to the point where I needed help with my psoriasis condition. And so I reached out to Dr. Bhatia.
Thanks, Jim. And yeah, as you said, this has been 2 years of these experiences, and it was good that you came to us, and it was good that we got a chance to work with figuring out what was the right therapy and moving forward. And we were really grateful that you could share your story with us, as well as everybody here today. We're going to talk to Jim in a little bit, but right now I want to talk a little bit about some of the treatments that are available for moderate to severe plaque psoriasis, and specifically biologic medications, which people can often hear stereotypes or they can get misinformation about, especially in times of the pandemic, where they hear about biological therapy and they worry about their immune system. And what we're learning now is the way that these therapies are actually really just targeting all of the mechanisms that make plaque psoriasis. And effective treatment of psoriasis not only manages the symptoms, but it's important to reduce the inflammation that could lead to other diseases or some of the other complications, such as comorbidities. The comorbidities of psoriasis can be pretty debilitating. We talk about psoriatic arthritis, cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, which can involve obesity, insulin resistance, cholesterol issues, and then, of course, as Jim was alluding to, some of the mental health concerns, some of the issues that go along with the depressive and anxiety components that go along with psoriasis, as well as self-esteem and quality of life, which can compound all of these other factors. The dermatologist approach is one of treat to target. And we'll discuss the word target in a second, but under this concept of treating to target, you can figure out some specific goals and important targets for treatment outcomes. But target also has a double-edged word, which means we're targeting the proteins that make the disease when we're looking at biologic therapy being specific. And by that, I'm talking about how biologic medicines are made. And usually they're made from some natural living source, such as human cells, plants, or animal cells. And the targets are actually a specific part of the immune mechanisms or immune systems that are at play, rather than what you understand about the immune system. And basically just trying to block the molecules that make psoriasis worse, rather than impact the whole system. So patients may have a concern about infections or cancer. And when you look at today's biologic therapy, we're talking now about very specific proteins and their mechanisms of being inhibited or blocked so that the psoriasis pathways can be blocked, which I'll show you again in a second. But we use biologics to treat and block the action of a specific immune cell called the T cells. T cells are the ones that send the messages, but we're not trying to block their ability to serve other purposes in the immune system, only those that are relevant to psoriasis. And this includes these other proteins, and they all have some long names like interleukins, which are interleukin 17, 12, and 23, very specific to the psoriasis pathway. as well as TNF, which is also known as tumor necrosis factor, which is a very important protein that does a lot of tissue damage. So if you look at the left, I'll walk you through the pathway. So the dendritic cell is kind of the messaging cell. It takes in what's going on with the immune mechanisms and whether they see something wrong. It's almost like radar, if you will. And things can follow one of two paths. So you see the Th1 pathway, which is on the left. Th1 is the type of T helper cell that, again, sends messages out to other cells to do their jobs. It's almost like the quarterback taking the message and sending it to wide receivers and running backs, to use a football analogy. And some of those other cell lines will receive the ball, which are these other messages here from what you see, IL-12, for example, IL-2, tumor necrosis factor, and interferons. These are all natural proteins your body makes to fight off infection or to solve some inflammation process. But if you see the path to the right, this is the Th17 path that is very specific to psoriasis. And these other numbers that are important here, Th17 talks about a specific type of cell that's dedicated to psoriasis pathways. And then you have these other proteins around it, IL-17, IL-17A and F, 22, IL-23. These are all very important for the pathways to continue to work and move forward. But if you notice, the IL-23 receptors are before the conversion of the Th17 activated cell, whereas the other ones, 17 and 22, they come from the activated 17 cell. So interleukin-23 is almost like a light switch that turns off the ability of that Th17 cell to actually make more of those other proteins that affect psoriasis. So it's working what we call upstream or ahead of that conversion. So what interleukin-23 does, without getting too scientific, is it's regulating the release of those inflammatory cytokines or those important proteins. And we've recognized that interleukin-23 has a very strong regulatory approach to psoriasis. And it can actually, again, the idea is to turn off the faucet rather than mop up the mess, which is what I like to tell patients how these therapies actually work. So from there, let's talk a little bit about ILUMYA. So what is ILUMYA? ILUMYA is a biologic therapy, and it's exciting to talk about one biologic treatment in the name of ILUMYA, or tildrakizumab, has made itself to the market. Now, ILUMYA works differently from other biologics because it blocks the IL-23 molecule to help reduce the redness, flaking, and plaque thickness that's on the skin. And ILUMYA is a prescription medication that's used to treat adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis who may benefit from taking injections, pills, or systemic therapies, or treatment with ultraviolet light or phototherapy. And when ILUMYA blocks interleukin-23, it's working differently because it's blocking the redness, flaking, and scaling, as we saw, but there's less production of other molecules that make psoriasis worse, as we saw in the diagram with the cell line. And blocking those molecules will slow down the growth of skin cells with less buildup of other skin cells and the accumulation of that dead skin. Fewer red patches occur, and that's the scaling that patients see. So some important safety information here. I mean, ILUMYA is not for everyone, and only your dermatologist can determine if it's the right therapy for you. So do not take ILUMYA if you're allergic to ILUMYA or any of its ingredients, and ILUMYA may lower your ability to fight infections or may increase your risk of infections, even after what we discussed. And before starting treatment, your doctor should check you for tuberculosis and any other infections. And when there's time, you read the safety information on slides 24 to 27 of the webinar. And the ILUMYA.com website is actually very thorough in this discussion for more information. So the important part about ILUMYA is the dosing. And no other treatment for moderate to severe plaque psoriasis has fewer doses than ILUMYA. And again, it's an injection that's given by your dermatologist in the office. The dermatologist will give you ILUMYA as an injection under your skin, not like a vaccine, but as a subcutaneous injection, which is, again, on the thigh or the stomach or on the upper arms. And we'd like to rotate those sites to avoid what's called injection site reactions. And after the initial doses, you should plan to see your dermatologist every 12 weeks, even when the skin starts to look better, which is very important. So the two initial doses, one at week 0 and one at week 4, and then after that, a single dose every 12 weeks. You see here 16, 28, 40, and 52. Those are the only doses that are given for a year. And what's important is that the doses may be infrequent, but the results are lasting. And as you see on the top from the left, 6 out of 10 patients who were treated were considered either clear or almost clear in the research trials after the 2 initial doses of ILUMYA at 12 weeks. And 7 out of the 10 patients treated had much clearer skin after 7 months. So it shows that it's a very durable, long-lasting effect and impact on psoriasis even after 3 doses. At 1 year out, 8 out of 10 patients who had 75% clearer skin with ILUMYA at 7 months were even still clear even after 1 year of treatment. But the most important data is you see the bottom, 9 out of 10 patients who had much clearer skin after 1 year still had clearer skin after 3 years of treatment. So ILUMYA can give you clearer skin that continues to clear over time, delivering results that get clear of plaques, redness, and flakes, which are really some of the things that we discussed and from Jim's experience about what led to him coming to get treatment. And this is some newer data with even more sustained clearance and durable responses at even 5 years. And what's important here is that with the extent of the improvement, not just observed at 28 weeks, there was improvement at baseline as well as the patient's course. And as this was discussed at an article and data presented at a European Academy of Dermatology and Venereology virtual congress last October. So this long-term data showed patients who received ILUMYA maintained consistent and extensive skin clearance through 5 years of continuous treatment. What's important is also that this is well understood for safety for ILUMYA. That was confirmed through 5 years of study, and it showed that the safety of ILUMYA was actually comparable to placebo. So these results emphasize that ILUMYA keeps working year on year regardless of baseline level of the skin disease that presented, patient's age, or their background illnesses. One thing to remember about metabolic syndrome, which I mentioned earlier, is that patients can be diagnosed with metabolic syndrome if 3 of the following 5 risk factors are present. These include high blood sugar or high blood glucose, obesity, high blood pressure, a low HDL, which is the good cholesterol, and high triglyceride levels. And these are significantly more common in patients with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis as compared to patients without moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. So important to recognize not only the sustained clearance, but also the impact on the entire disease, as well as these other comorbidities like metabolic syndrome. And again, it's important to understand that ILUMYA is not for everyone. Only your dermatologist and you can decide if it's right for you. There's a lot of the safety information that we just discussed. And before starting treatment, check in with your doctor about the risk of tuberculosis and infections, reading the safety information as we discussed here on this slide set. And on the right column, there's some important things to remember about some of the side effects. And these were side effects that patients in the trials experienced that are reported, including upper respiratory infections, 14% of the patients in the ILUMYA treatment subset versus 12% with the placebo subset. And then there were injection site reactions in about 3% of the ILUMYA patients versus 2% with the placebo patients. And same numbers about with diarrhea, 2% with the ILUMYA patients and 1% with the placebo patients. So these can occur in clinical trials and these all have to be reported. But ILUMYA had a very low risk for serious infections, and people who took ILUMYA had the same low risk for serious infection as placebo. So that was very important to recognize. Number one thing also is that there's no ongoing routine laboratory monitoring that's necessary. Most dermatologists may perform some baseline tests, also check for tuberculosis, but after that initial screen, no routine lab monitoring is necessary. So blood tests may not be necessary once the treatment course has started. So I'm going to turn it back over to Jim. And Jim's going to talk a little bit about his experience taking ILUMYA and having been a patient on ILUMYA and experienced his success.
Thanks, Dr. Bhatia. I had been using topical treatments to manage my symptoms for a while, but I wanted to try something different to really kind of get to the source of my psoriasis. And so I reached out to Dr. Bhatia and his team after seeing an advertisement. After trying some treatments, Dr. Bhatia took a look at my health profile and recommended that I join the ILUMYA clinical trial. I started ILUMYA early in 2020, and to my amazement, after about 2 months, I was 80 to 90% clear, and now, after only 4 doses, I'm about 98% clear, and let me tell you, it feels incredible. I know everyone is different, their bodies might react differently, but this example is how ILUMYA worked for me. I find it helpful to have ILUMYA administered by Dr. Bhatia in his office every 3 months because it gives me an opportunity to check in on my progress and ask any questions that I might have. I've found that this schedule fits into my lifestyle really well, and it's convenient for me. I especially noticed the painful spots on my feet were gone, and my feet were covered. I now feel comfortable going to the beach and playing sports, and this is a big part of my life in Southern California, so it's really important to me. I don't feel like people are staring at my hands and legs anymore. I'm no longer self-conscious about that, which is freeing. I am much more confident with everyone that I communicate with, both professionally and personally. If I was going to give advice to anyone who's suffering through moderate to severe psoriasis as much as I have, it would be to consider biologic treatments. If you're looking for a moderate to severe plaque psoriasis treatment, I would recommend that you do some additional research and ask your doctor about ILUMYA. I can truthfully say that ILUMYA has improved the way I live my life, and I'm so happy with that.
Well, thank you, Jim and Dr. Bhatia, for a great presentation. Now we will answer a few frequently asked questions. So, what should I expect when seeing my doctor or dermatologist during the pandemic?
You know, I can answer that from a patient perspective. The pandemic has not affected my ability at all to receive treatment. Therapeutics Clinical Research has safety guidelines in place. When I go to my appointment, I wait in the car until I'm requested to come in. When I do go in, everyone has masks and patients are required to wash their hands before entering the exam rooms. I feel safe in going, and I have not missed a treatment yet.
Yeah, I would echo that with Jim. And Therapeutics Clinical Research is our clinic. And as Jim said, we have patients wait out in the car rather than coming into the waiting room after they check in. We go out and get them or call them in. Everyone's wearing a mask. We walk them back, making sure that we really don't have more than one or two other patients in rooms at the same time, so it's not crowded in the clinic. And everyone gets their temperature checked, washes their hands, and when it comes time, we're all examining them with the obviously a safe little distance as we need it, but also everyone's wearing a mask and keeping comfortable. And I think that's very reassuring to us as well as the patients. We're not going to let the issues surrounding the pandemic impact their healthcare overall.
Another question. I've tried many different treatments. How will I know the biologics will work for me?
Well, the biologics have been in the market for many years, and it's important to really consult with the dermatologist about which might be the right approach, depending on what we discussed with severity, as well as anything else that goes along with the patient's psoriasis and their comorbidities and the risks. Biologic therapies have really changed the way we treat moderate to severe psoriasis from the inside out, rather than simply just focusing on the treatments or the scaling and the dryness and the itching. And again, it's important to get the right education about how biologics work as well as how safe they are. And talking to your dermatologist will help with that.
And Dr. Bhatia, are there financial support options for ILUMYA patients?
Yeah, so I'll discuss a few things Sun Pharma has offered as far as financial assistance through their ILUMYA support program. And patients with commercial insurance can qualify for what's called the ILUMYA Early Access Program. So if patients have commercial insurance, but the coverage has either been delayed or denied, the patient may still be eligible to receive ILUMYA for up to 2 years for free. And then commercially insured patients will then be automatically added to the early access program through enrollment in the ILUMYA support. And then there's also the ILUMYA copay program. And if commercial insurance covers the prescriptions, the patient may pay as little as $5 per dose. And as we saw with 6 doses, that turns out to be pretty good. Now, the patients who have no insurance, the patient assistance program might be an avenue so that the patient does not have enough insurance coverage or does not have insurance at all, that patient may be able to receive ILUMYA for free. So definitely some options that Sun Pharma has available so that dermatologists and patients can make the right decision for them.
Great. And one last question. What are common side effects for ILUMYA?
So many of the adverse events that were reported in the trials and the common side effects are upper respiratory infections, injection site reactions, and diarrhea. We mentioned some of their incidents in the discussion. And these are not all of the possible side effects of ILUMYA, and some of them were very little in percentage above the placebo reporting. So best thing is to call your dermatologist for any medical advice about side effects and have those discussions when therapy is being discussed.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Bhatia and Jim, for providing today's presentation, and thank you for those who are attending today's webinar. This webinar has been recorded and will be shared with attendees at a future date. You will also receive a quick evaluation survey via the email you registered to attend today's webinar. Please take a moment to complete the survey. We appreciate your comments. Please continue to watch as the next few slides display the important safety information for ILUMYA.
What is ILUMYA? ILUMYA is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis who may benefit from taking injections, pills, systemic therapy, or phototherapy, treatment using ultraviolet or UV light. Important safety information. What is the most important information I should know about ILUMYA? Do not use ILUMYA if you have had severe allergic reactions to ILUMYA or any of its ingredients. Get emergency medical help right away if you get any of the following symptoms of a serious allergic reaction. Feel faint, trouble breathing or throat tightness, swelling of your face, eyelids, lips, mouth, tongue, or throat, chest tightness, skin rash. ILUMYA is a medicine that may lower the ability of your immune system to fight infections and may increase the risk of infections. Your healthcare provider should check you for infections and tuberculosis before treatment with ILUMYA and may treat you for TB before you begin treatment with ILUMYA. If you have any history of TB or have active TB, your healthcare provider should watch you closely for signs and symptoms of TB during and after treatment with ILUMYA. Tell your healthcare provider right away if you have an infection or symptoms of an infection, including fever, sweats or chills, muscle aches, weight loss, cough, warm, red, or painful skin, or sores on your body different from your psoriasis, diarrhea or stomach pain, shortness of breath, burning when you urinate or urinating more often than normal, blood in your phlegm. Before receiving ILUMYA, tell your healthcare provider about all of your medical conditions, including if you have had any condition or symptoms listed in the section, "What is the most important information I should know about ILUMYA?" Have an infection that does not go away or keeps coming back. Have TB or have been in close contact with someone with TB. Recently received or are scheduled to receive a vaccine immunization. You should avoid receiving live vaccines during treatment with ILUMYA. Are pregnant or plan to become pregnant. It is not known if ILUMYA can harm your unborn baby. Are breastfeeding or plan to breastfeed. It is not known if ILUMYA passes into your breast milk. Tell your healthcare provider about all the medicines you take, including prescription and over-the-counter medicines, vitamins, and herbal supplements. It is not known if ILUMYA is safe and effective in children under 18 years of age. What are the possible side effects of ILUMYA? ILUMYA may cause serious side effects. C. What is the most important information I should know about ILUMYA? The most common side effects of ILUMYA include upper respiratory inflammation, injection site reactions, and diarrhea. These are not all possible side effects of ILUMYA. Call your doctor for medical advice about side effects. You are encouraged to report any negative side effects of ILUMYA to the FDA. Visit www.fda.gov/medwatch or call 1-800-FDA-1088. You are encouraged to report side effects or ADEs, adverse drug effects, to our Drug Safety Department at 1-800-406-7984 or drug.safetyusa@sunpharma.com, which is preferred, with as much information as available. Please visit ILUMYA.com for full prescribing information and medical guide, and discuss any questions with your doctor.